Since the late 90s, scientists have been able to clone cows, pigs, goats, and other animals, but their ultimate goal has always been to bring back extinct species from the dead. And in 2003, a Spanish scientist named Dr. Jose Folch made history by successfully cloning the the Pyrenean ibex, which sadly died a few minutes later due to a lung problem, but not before being cloned to perfection on the second try. This mad achievement has definitely opened a can of worms. And here's a list of other extinct species that will be bringing back to life real soon. The dodo. The dodo bird was a straight up stunner, but he couldn't fly like his cousin the ostrich, who got to live it up on the island of Mauritius. The dodo was a straight up legend that everyone was obsessed with, and it's easy to see why. This bird was 1 meter tall and weighed a solid 64 pounds. Plus, he had a face so dope you could call him Jean-Philippe, and his curly feather tuft was straight up magnificent. The Jean-Philippe crew was living it up on that island with no predators to mess with them. That sounds chill, right? Ain't no risk of getting their plump butts eaten by some hungry predator, but get this, that's actually what led to their downfall. Imagine every day you're just chilling, snacking on fruits, nuts, snails, and small vertebrates without a care in the world, and then out of nowhere in the 16th century, some Dutch sailors show up and they're hungry as and they see you with your slow and curious self and they're like, hey, looks like an easy snack. Since you've never had any predators before, you don't know how to defend yourself or hide, like flying up in trees. And that's how it all went down. So basically, these settlers were straight up ruthless and destroyed the dodo's home. They even brought in a bunch of invasive species that messed everything up. And by the 18th century, the dodo was gone, bro. It became a symbol of how humans can really mess things up when they don't think about the consequences of their actions. But now, some fancy pants biologists are talking about resurrection biology, or de-extinction. They want to bring the dodo back to life using DNA and stuff. Sounds like they're pretty high up there, but whatever. Basically, they take the up DNA from the extinct species and create a genetic model to rebuild that sucker. They can either modify the DNA of a related species or clone the animal using DNA scraps they found lying around. Now, don't get it twisted. They ain't just trying to bring back any old bird because it's pretty or whatever. The Jean-Philippe crew is super important to the ecosystem of Mauritius. Without them, a ton of plant species are in serious trouble because they rely on the birds to spread their seeds around. And if they can't do that, those plants are going to straight up die out or have to rely on some other animals to do the job. The woolly mammoth. Have you ever heard of these massive creatures called woolly mammoths? These dudes were straight up beasts. They could headbutt you into the cemetery. They were like these prehistoric elephants, and they finally died out like 3,600 years ago on Wrangel Island in Russia. That was like the last holdout for these mammoths because almost the whole species had already died out 10,000 years ago. But get this, these mammoths were perfectly suited for living in crazy cold temperatures where you die if you didn't get inside and warm up ASAP. And they were freaking enormous. They could weigh up to 10 tons, which is like way more than African elephants. Those guys top out at only 6 tons. And get this, their shoulders could be as high as 11 feet. But the craziest thing is their tusks, bro. Those things could be over 13 feet long. That's like perfect for impaling predators like cave lions. Those dudes could weigh up to 1,100 pounds, which is like twice as much as a lion chilling in the savannah today. Or the giant bear Arctodus simus. Those guys were like 2,200 pounds of pure hate, which is like 661 pounds more than the heaviest Kodiak bears. You gotta have some serious defensive skills to take on these brutes. And that's not even counting the sloppy humans who used to throw spears at them. These same humans who used to throw spears at mammoths are now feeling guilty as hell and want to ask for forgiveness. They're all like, yo, we messed up by killing off these 10-ton beasts. Like, let's bring them back to life. And get this, scientists have found a ton of mammoth remains frozen in ice, which means they've got all the DNA they need to make it happen. These mammoths are basically cousins of modern elephants, so biologists are drooling at the thought of making some hybrid species that can handle cold-ass climates. And get this, even though the planet's heating up, there are still some cold ecosystems like Wrangel Island where these mammoths used to chill, and those environments are still there today, so it's like a perfect setup to bring them back. George Church is a boss biologist who's leading the charge on bringing these woolly mammoths back to life at Harvard. He says they're gonna do wonders for the cold-ass ecosystems where they used to live by helping to restore the balance. First up, they'll graze on the snow to get at the plants growing underneath. And get this, when they're munching, they don't mess around with the snow. They just eat what they need and move on, which actually helps keep the grass short and makes room for new plants to grow. Plus, when they're walking around, they're trampling the snow, which makes it harder and easier for other animals to get around. And all that packed snow is a way better spot for plants to grow grow than some jumbled up mess. So you see, bringing these mammoths back is going to be huge for the whole ecosystem. Last but not least, the big old poop from these mammoths is like a superfood for plants. It's packed with nutrients and helps the soil to fertilize and grow even more plants. So basically, bringing back these guys is going to be like turning a dump into a garden, you dig? And get this, according to some hotshot genome engineering researchers, these mammoths could be back on the scene by the late 2020s. That's like right around the corner. But let's be real here, if tickets for the 2024 Olympics in Paris are already crazy expensive, I can't even imagine how much it's going to cost to go see some woolly mammoths. The thylacine. We're headed to the land of predators with the thylacine, aka the Tasmanian tiger. This carnivore was straight up native to Tasmania in Australia, and it was the biggest meat eater in the marsupial fam, which includes some real angry kangaroos and eucalyptus-eating koalas. This dude was like 6 feet long and weighed 66 pounds, and he was a straight-up killer. He hunted and sent kangaroos, wallabies, and birds to the graveyard, man. And get this, he could leap like a kangaroo and jump like 10 feet high in one go. Plus, his mouth could open up to 120 degrees, and his jaw was strong enough to crush any victim's skull nearby. The thylacine was also known for his famous vertical black stripes on his back and tail, which made him famous around the world. But get this, these guys went extinct in Australia like 2,000 years ago, thanks to competition for food from humans and dingoes. Then this dude finally went extinct from Tasmania in the last century. But check it, he was like super hunted since the 1800s because some dumb settlers thought he was a sheep killer. They even put out bounties to encourage farmers to massacre him like crazy. Like they wanted this dude gone, gone, gone. The last wild thylacine got smoked by a farmer in 1930, and the last dude in captivity died in 1936 because some idiots at the zoo didn't take care of him. They left him out in the blazing sun during the day and the freezing cold at night, because apparently they didn't know how to zoo or something. Anyway, I hope karma came around and dealt with those good for nothing. Nowadays, the thylacine is a freaking post-mortem hero. Tons of organizations have promised to protect endangered species and make sure we don't lose any more animals like him. We can't let history repeat itself, you know? Since the early 2000s, there have been a bunch of Aussie research groups who are super into bringing the thylacine back to life. They really want to make it happen. In 2020, they even extracted DNA from a mummified thylacine that was 106 years old. And get this, they were able to map out the whole genome, which is like all the stuff they need to clone this dude and bring him back from the dead. And remember Dolly the sheep? She got cloned like 20 years ago, man. She was born in 1996 and died in 2003. That's what science can do when it's got everything it needs, you know? So basically, to clone a thylacine, you gotta extract cells from some animal that's real close to this dude, swap out the genetic material with the stuff from the genome, and then put it in a mama from some other close species that's still alive. It's like super clear cut when it comes to the mammoth, because they got modern elephants as cousins. But with the Tasmanian tiger, there's no close relatives still alive. The closest they got is the Tasmanian devil, and that dude's like 17 pounds of pure rage. Cloning extinct species is like a super recent thing, and it's insane how these scientists are just crushing it left and right. Like in 2013, this paleontologist named Mike Archer was all about bringing the thylacine back to life. And get this, he actually cloned an embryo from another extinct species, the gastric incubating frog. Like, how crazy is that? The giant unicorn of Siberia. Elasmotherium was like a straight up heavyweight champ, man. This dude weighed like 4 to 5 tons, which is like twice as much as the modern day rhinoceros. He was like 2 meters tall, which is insane. But let's be real here, y'all don't care about any of that. You're just drooling over his freaking massive horn. The rhinoceros family is like straight up dangerous because of the massive horn they got on their forehead, and combined with some humans' crazy stories, it's what inspired the whole horse/unicorn myth in people's minds. Let me tell you, when they found the giant Siberian unicorn with that huge horn, everyone freaked out. Scientists looked at the size of today's rhino horns and figured out that Elasmotherium's horn must have been more than 8 feet long. That's insane, especially when you consider that modern rhinos only got like 23 inches of horn. It's like comparing a pea shooter to a bazooka. Elasmotherium wasn't taken out by Homo sapiens like a lot of other species. Nah, this beast was just too damn good at living in the Ice Age. But then, when the climate changed relatively quickly, old Elasmotherium couldn't adapt and went extinct. She was like a total princess. She only wanted to eat the same dry-ass plants she was used to, even though there were other things to munch on. Like, talk about being picky to your own extinction, am I right? Now, before some biologist comes and gives me a wedgie, let me tell you about the latest research. Turns out our boy Elasmotherium, aka the Siberian unicorn, probably looked a lot more more like this. Did you peep that? The horn is tiny! Here's the deal. It's super tough to fossilize a horn because it's made of the same stuff as our nails and hair, which doesn't fossilize so good. So scientists were just guessing at the size of the horn based on the size of the skull and dome. But it looks like they might have been wrong because this new research says the horn was actually pretty small. It's not as flashy, but that's how it is. The Siberian unicorn lived alongside modern humans, and there's even some cave paintings in Russia's Kopova cave that seem to show Elasmotherium, but without the big-ass horn. Biologists didn't think it was possible, but now that they know the horn was smaller, it seems more legit, right? Living up in the frozen north like they did, if scientists ever find a frozen Elasmotherium like they did with the woolly mammoths, they could get a complete DNA genome and bring our unicorn princess back to life. But if they do, they better make sure she's got a decent-sized horn, or people are gonna leave 1-star reviews all over Google. The migratory pigeon. Sorry if I'm getting too hyped up, but for y'all hating on pigeons, you might want to look away. For the rest of you, picture this. Flocks of pigeons so massive that they darken the whole dang sky, swarming like a freaking locust plague and wrecking entire areas. Let me introduce you to the migratory pigeon. Back in the day, there were billions of them. Billions! And now, not a single one left. For real, there are only about 400 million modern pigeons in the world, but that's like a fraction of the only population of migratory pigeons that used to exist in North America alone. They were so thick on the ground that stories from the 19th century tell how they would come by the millions around farms, breaking tree branches just by sitting on them. And that's not all. Some scientists back then were counting the different groups, and one dude, John James Audubon, saw 163 large groups flying over him in Kentucky in just one day. That's almost a billion pigeons. The sky was just straight up filled with these feathered armies. Bro, there's even an account of a flock of migratory pigeons taking a whopping 14 hours to fly over an area because there were so many of them. This group was 300 miles long and over a mile wide. That's mental. The migratory pigeon, once numbering in the billions, was completely wiped out from the face of the earth, and it's all thanks to human scumbags. These assholes hunted them down to extinction, destroyed their natural habitats, and spread diseases that took a massive toll on these poor birds. Hunting was particularly encouraged as these 3 to 5 billion migratory pigeons that lived between the 1500s and 1800s were capable of devastating everything in their path, especially trees, as mentioned earlier. It was like a Category 5 tornado it hit. And the crazy part is, you didn't even need guns to hunt them. There were so many on every tree branch that people would simply venture into the forest at night with sticks and knock the pigeons right off. It was an easy way to get food that could feed Americans for days and days. Just imagine the damage these pigeons could cause to crops. No wonder the Americans wanted to exterminate them and succeeded. The last wild migratory pigeon was spotted in 1900 in Ohio, while the last one in captivity, a female named Martha, died in 1914 at the Cincinnati Zoo. Many predators such as eagles, hawks, and coyotes were on a roll when it came to snacking on the useless migratory pigeon. With these birds gone, it had a massive impact on their population, not to mention the devastation of forest ecosystems that relied on their seed dispersal and soil fertilization. Luckily, the recent extinction means that biologists have well-preserved specimens to work with, and they can reconstruct the migratory pigeon's genome to combine with an egg from its closest living relative, the band-tailed pigeon. However, there's still the question of whether a band-tailed pigeon will want to take care of a little hatchling that doesn't look like her at all. Perhaps biologists can play the role of adoptive moms? Despite this small detail, it's undoubtedly one of the animals with the best chance of coming back to life in the short term. The auroch. The auroch, also known as the wild bull, is a dead ringer for our modern cows and bulls. And that's because it's the granddaddy of all modern cattle. It was tamed more than 10,000 years ago, and that gave birth to all those tasty domestic breeds you're familiar with. Whether you want to pet them or chow down on them, that's your call, no judgment here. The auroch, or wild bull, was massive, standing at 6 feet high at the shoulder, and the dudes were like 1 ton of pure muscle. And let's not forget those epic 1 meter long horns. It was a sight to behold. And talk about wanderlust. These beasts were migratory as f***. They roamed across huge territories in search of the best grass, bark, and juicy fruits. And you know what happens when they eat all the good stuff and poop like crazy? They become a crucial part of the ecosystem, fertilizing the soil with their excrement. Obviously, the humans of the time were digging the auroch, not only for its delicious meat, but also for its bones, which were used to craft all kinds of things from tools to bling to instruments. For those who didn't know, the auroch is also featured in the cave paintings of the Lascaux cave in France. It's a sad story, fam. The auroch went to same way as many other creatures. Got hunted too much, lost its crib to humans, and before you know it, it was extinct 400 years ago, with the last one dying in Poland in the 1600s. But scientists have been hustling in their labs for a minute now to bring back the auroch by any means necessary. They've pulled out a ton of its DNA, but it's always been messed up, so they've changed their focus in the last 10 years to modern cows, which are the closest genetically to the auroch. They're breeding 300 calves through a program called Operation Taurus that uses selective breeding. They're looking for the ones with the most similarities to the auroch, and then keep breeding those ones until they almost have identical genetics. This program is part of Rewilding Europe, an effort to bring back the lost wild species to the continent. Anyhow, let's get real and give some good reasons why bringing back the auroch is worth the effort, or else the skeptics will ruin the party. First of all, the auroch has significant cultural and historical value in Europe, being a prominent figure in prehistoric art and having played a vital role in the survival and development of ancient human communities. The auroch used to be a big deal in keeping plants and animals in check in Europe. Bringing them back could help fix the natural ecosystems that we've messed up with our human nonsense. And for those brainiacs out there, regular cows these days ain't got much genetic diversity because of their limited DNA mixing. But if we crossbreed the resurrected aurochs with the modern cattle, we can give them stronger immune systems to fight off diseases and handle the changes in their environment better. This ain't gonna sit well with the veggie heads and animal lovers, but we gotta acknowledge the cash potential. See, if we bring back the auroch and make its meat a delicacy, it won't just be for the locals across Europe. It'll be a fancy product for the bougie folks who crave new experiences to fill their boring lives. These people would fight to chow down on auroch butt cheeks. And let's not forget the big bucks this could bring to the regions where the auroch would be bred. Alright, you already know everything, but there's a bunch of other animals that scientists are trying to bring back to life too. If you want to hear more, I'll hit you up with a part 2. But check it. The idea of bringing these extinct animals back to life is causing a lot of drama and beef in both the scientific community and the public. It's raising some serious ethical and environmental questions, feel me? Some peeps are worried that bringing these animals back will mess up the ecosystems that are already struggling, or that it'll cause problems with the locals. But you know how it goes, progress can't be stopped. So, who's trying to go to the zoo in a couple years and see some mammoths or what?